A lot of people are under the impression that Noah's flood never happened.
Well, Matt, that's because it didn't.
And I'll tell you for why.
No evidence.
No evidence.
No evidence.
We're not talking impressions here, we're talking about verifiable, observable scientific facts. Where's the global sediment layer? Why does the fossil record show gradual evolution? And not to mention the logistical absurdity of cramming 2 of every species onto a single homemade boat. And let's not forget, that includes dinosaurs. So, Matt, it's not an impression, it's reality. And reality says, no global flood.
Shut up and sit down, you big bald f***.
Please subscribe.
And if you tell people that you believe in biblical creationism, sometimes they will laugh at you. But let me tell you, biblical creationism and Noah's flood are 2 verifiable things that you can show to be accurate.
How? There's no evidence and no logical explanation for the water's disappearance after the flood. So no, it's not verifiable, Matt. It's wishful thinking disguised as history.
In this video, I'm going to give you 10 reasons why Noah's flood is a fact.
That's fine, Matt. It's you a video. But in this video, I'm going to give you 10 reasons why Matt Powell's facts are not facts at all.
Number 1 is because you find sea life on every single mountain.
Every mountain?
There are entire whales that we find perfectly preserved on top of mountains. We also find gigantic oysters, some as big as cars on the Andes Mountains. How did they get there? And not to mention, these oysters are often sealed shut, and they were not even able to open when they died, as oysters and clams normally do.
So, Matt claims sea life on mountains proves Noah's flood. Whales and car-sized oysters. Ooh. First off, Matt, tectonic plates exist. Mountains rise over millions of years. Sea creatures on mountains? That's just geology 101, not a global bathtub story. And they aren't perfectly preserved from a sudden flood, they're fossils. Remnants of ancient seas lifted by tectonic forces. And car-sized oysters, that's just called gigantism. It's a known biological phenomenon in ancient marine life. And as for the sealed oysters, so? That's just taphonomy, the study of how organisms decay and become fossilized. It's not a magical flood seal. Try again, Matt, but maybe this time read a textbook.
Evidence number 2 would be polystrata fossils. Think about it, we find trees that are upside down in some cases that are penetrating multiple layers of the geologic column. Now, if these layers slowly accumulated over millions of years, why is it that you have a tree that connects many of these layers? That means that the layers are an identical age, because trees aren't just going to stand there for millions of years waiting to be fossilized as sediment layers are slowly forming around them. It tells us that these trees were placed there by a cataclysmic process and not by slow and gradual change in the Earth's crust.
Correct. They don't just stand there for millions of years. These fossils show rapid events, not a slow uniform accumulation. And I know you'll say, aha, like Noah's global flood. But hang on a second. It's like finding a car buried in a landslide. That doesn't mean that the entire mountain was built around the car in one day. It means a rapid local event. So Matt, your proof is just a basic misunderstanding of sedimentology. Rapid burial is a local phenomenon, not evidence for a global flood. So, next.
My third piece of evidence would be coal seams. Some of them are actually over 100 feet thick. Now, coal is made up of vegetation and swamp material and plants and trees that get smashed together between sediments. That's how coal is formed. And so in order to get a seam that's over 100 feet thick, you would have to have a globally cataclysmic event to be able to create such coal seams.
Nope. Coal seams form from accumulated plant matter in swamps and wetlands over long periods of time, not from a single global smash fest. These thick You try that again. These thick seams represent vast ancient forests which accumulated over thousands and thousands of years in specific environments. It's like saying a giant sandwich proves a worldwide food fight. No, Matt, it proves a lot of bread and fillings over time. Now, these seams show slow, gradual accumulation in environments conducive to plant growth and preservation, not a sudden global burial. The thickness represents the longevity and productivity of those ancient ecosystems. It's just basic paleobotany and geology, Matt. So your proof is just a misunderstanding of how coal forms. Anyone else starting to see a pattern forming here?
The fourth piece of evidence would be rock arches. Think about it. Rocks are actually breaking down. This mountain that's behind me is being broken down by gravity over time. Gravity is causing everything to erode flat. Could rock arches have been standing for millions and millions of years without crumbling down from gravity? The answer is no. These rock arches were formed in the recent past by Noah's flood, by a globally cataclysmic event, and that's why they're still standing today, is because they were placed there in the recent past. They were formed in the recent history of the planet, and not millions and millions of years ago.
Wrong, and hilariously wrong. Matt, rock arches form through selective erosion. Wind, water, and even gravity erodes weaker rock layers, leaving behind the more resistant formations. It's like a sculptor carving a statue just on a geological timescale. Different rock types have different resistances. Some erode fast, some erode slow. Arches can last for thousands, even tens of thousands of years, depending on the rock type and the environment it's in. It's not magic, it's just geology. And recent, well, compared to the age of the Earth, which for clarity is about 4.6 billion years, thousands of years is recent, but it's still way outside the time scale of your flood. So another fact that isn't a fact at all.
My fifth piece of evidence would be hoodoos. Hoodoos are rock spires that often have very little debris at the bottom of them. Now, is it possible that these structures could be sitting there for millions of years and not have come crumbling down from gravity? Wouldn't these rocks have eventually broken down and become completely flat with the Earth's crust if millions of years of time were what had allowed them to be placed there? Let me tell you something. What placed these rock spires there, these hoodoos, was a globally cataclysmic event that happened in the recent past. Noah's flood is a fact of geology, and the reason that we know that is because of these things that we are now observing in science that you can test and verify to be true.
Wrong again, Matt. Hoodoos form through differential erosion, just like rock arches. Different rock layers erode at different rates, leaving behind those spears. Was it spires? Spears? Leaving them behind. It's not magic. The lack of debris at the bottom, that's just because the wind and water remove it. It's called transportation, Matt. It's not a mystery, and as far as recent goes, well, it's the same as the last one, isn't it? Read a book, Matt. No, not that book.
My sixth piece of evidence would be mountains themselves. Many mountain ranges are made of bent rock. Now, according to Darwinists, the plates are moving 1 to 2 inches per year, and it causes mountains to slowly get formed. But if that were true, how is it that you have mountains that are made up of bent rocks? You cannot bend hard rock. It will break. It will shatter. What it means is that these layers would have had to have all been pliable all at the same time and pushed up rapidly through plate tectonics, and that's how you have mountains that are still standing today and in those positions, because all of those layers were pliable during their formation. It's not that slow and gradual change in the Earth's crust caused mountains to be formed.
Wrong, Matt. Again! I know, I couldn't believe it either. There's that bloody pattern, though. Rocks can bend under immense pressure and heat over long periods. It's called ductile deformation. It's basic stuff. Mountains form through tectonic plate collisions, but over millions of years. The heat and the pressure from these collisions make rock pliable, allowing it to bend instead of break. It's like when you bend metal, when you heat it up. It's not magic, it's physics. And you're having enough trouble with geology, Matt. And you know what they say about geology?
You remember how you explained to me that the Kardashians aren't real celebrities? Well, geology is the Kardashians of science.
Number 7 would be sharks that are buried with dinosaurs in the center of the United States. How is it possible that a wave of water could hit the center of the United States to be able to bury hundreds of thousands of different animals with sea life, sharks, dinosaurs, and so on and so forth, all at dead center of the US. That means there would have been a globally catastrophic flood that would have been able to hit the center of the United States with waves from the oceanic coast.
First, the fossils you're talking about are found in sedimentary layers that were once ancient seas. The center of the US was once covered by shallow inland seas. It's called the Western Interior Seaway. And second, sharks and dinosaurs lived in different environments and different time periods, but they can be found in the same geological formations because those formations represent a history of changing environments. And these fossils are evidence of ancient seas and ecosystems, not a global flood. And Matt, you can say cataclysmic event as many times as you like. It will not make it true.
Number 8, we find whales in the desert. How did they get there? How do you get whale fossils that are preserved? Because remember, a fossil has to be rapidly buried by sediment in order to be preserved. How do you get it in the Sahara Desert? The answer is that a globally catastrophic flood, called Noah's Flood, actually happened and placed whales in the Sahara Desert that we're now finding later on as we do scientific research.
Simple, Matt. The Sahara Desert was once underwater. It was called the Tethys Ocean. It's not magic. It's not a global flood. The whale fossils in the Sahara are from ancient marine mammals that lived millions of years ago when the area was a sea. I mean, this stuff is so easy to find out. There's really no excuse, Matt, or any other Young Earth creationist.
Number 9, fossils. Think about it. Fossils require rapid burial in order to be preserved. So if you're finding things like fossilized ichthyosaurs giving birth, what that tells you is that it doesn't take 10,000 years to get a fossil, like Darwinists assume. It only takes a few moments in some cases. That would be an awfully long birth if it actually took that long for that fossil to form. You find fossilized schools of fish that are all together. We find fossilized fish eating other fish. Does it take 10,000 plus years to have a meal? These organisms were buried so quickly that they were buried in the act of whatever they were doing. You have a school of fish sticking together, and they didn't even have time to scatter because they were buried so quickly by the flood of Noah.
Yes, fossils require burial to be preserved, but rapid doesn't mean global. It means a relatively quick burial by sediment, like mudslides or volcanic ash. And 10,000 years? You're confusing fossilization with what you think the age of the Earth is. Fossilization is a process, not a timeline.
Number 10, we find cold rock that has been subducted into the hot molten mantle of the Earth. And this, I would say, is probably the most powerful piece of evidence for Noah's flood. How is it that you have cold rock that's 10 miles thick that has been subducted into the molten mantle, where you have hot rock all around it? How is that possible if slow and gradual change 1 to 2 inches per year is pulling that rock down into the mantle? What it shows us is that in the recent past, the crust of the Earth was broken up and pieces of rock were going under one another and literally causing mountains to form, as we covered earlier. But then we realized, since they're still cold, that this catastrophe must have happened in the recent past. So if you find cold rocks that are in the hot mantle of the Earth, and they're from the crust of the Earth, they had to have been rapidly subducted. And let me say this too, if something like that happened today, if you had a 10-mile thick piece of rock from the oceanic crust that was broken up and rapidly subducted, we would experience such a globally cataclysmic process here that we would have another global flood.
First of all, subduction is a well-understood process. Cold, dense oceanic plates do subduct into Earth's mantle. It's not magic though, it's physics. And yeah, it takes time, but time in geology is millions of years, not a biblical weekend. Secondly, the cold rock, well, it's not as cold as you might think. Yeah, it's cooler than the surrounding mantle, but it's still hot. Matt, it's nonsense. The Earth's mantle does not work the way you think it does.
These are just some facts that I wanted to share with you about why we know that Noah was a real person, that Adam and Eve were real people, and that you can trust the Bible and what God's Word has told us about these things such as geology in the book of Genesis.
Right. Let's be clear, Matt. None of those were facts. They were claims based on your faith, not evidence. And faith is fine, whatever makes you happy. But claiming biblical stories are facts is misleading. It's like saying Harry Potter is a historical document. Now, we can respect your beliefs, but we cannot ignore reality. So believe whatever you want to, but do not call it science. It's not. It's faith. And faith is personal, not universal. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you again on Friday. Love you. Bye.
Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Why does Denmark put barcodes on its ships? Too Scandinavian.
I don't think so. No, 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 no. I don't think so. No, 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 no. It's never, ever, ever,